A homeless woman crashed a Mafia funeral and did the impossible. She stopped them from burying the boss's son alive. The child she saved won't eat, won't sleep, won't breathe without her. Now the most dangerous man in the city has declared her family, and anyone who touches her is his enemy. The October rain fell like tears over the Romano estate in upstate New York. Inside the marble chapel, 200 people stood in silence, watching the small white casket that held 9-year-old Luca Romano. The boy's pale face, framed by dark curls, looked peaceful through the glass panel, too peaceful, like a porcelain doll arranged by careful hands. Don Vincent Romano stood at the front, his weathered face carved from stone. He hadn't cried. Mafia bosses didn't cry, not even for their only son. His hand rested on the casket's edge, the same hand that had signed death warrants and built an empire. Now it trembled. "Lord, we commend this child to your care." Father Murphy's voice echoed through the chapel. The pallbearers, 6 of Vincent's most trusted men, lifted the casket. The procession began its slow march toward the waiting hearse. Outside, thunder rumbled. Vincent followed behind. His wife Maria collapsed against her sister, sobbing into black lace. That's when the screaming started. "Stop! You can't bury him!" Every head turned. Through the chapel doors burst a woman, wild-eyed, soaking wet, her ragged coat dripping rainwater onto the polished floor. Her gray hair hung in tangled ropes around a face mapped with wrinkles and desperation. 2 guards immediately moved to intercept her. "He's not dead," the woman shrieked, fighting against their grip. "Please, you have to listen. The boy, Luca, he's alive." "Get her out," someone hissed. But Vincent raised his hand. Something in the woman's voice, not the madness everyone else heard, but a terrible certainty, made him pause. His dark eyes fixed on her face as the guards held her arms. "What did you say?" His voice was quiet, deadly. The woman stopped struggling. Rain dripped from her chin as she met his gaze without fear. "Your son is breathing, Mr. Romano. I saw his chest move. I've been watching from outside for an hour. Please, just check. What do you have to lose?" "You're insane," Maria wailed. "Our baby is gone. How dare you?" "I'm a nurse," the woman interrupted, her voice suddenly steady, professional. "Or I was 15 years ago. I know what death looks like. And that child in there isn't it." The chapel erupted in angry murmurs. Someone called for the police. Father Murphy stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. But Vincent's eyes never left the homeless woman. He had built his empire on reading people, knowing when they lied, when they feared, when they plotted. This woman wasn't lying. She was terrified, yes, but not of him. She was terrified of being wrong, of what it would mean if she stayed silent. "Open it," Vincent said. The crowd gasped. Maria grabbed his arm. "Vincent, please. Open it." The pallbearers exchanged glances, but didn't move. Vincent's consigliere, Frank Russo, stepped forward. Frank had been with him for 20 years, his right hand in every decision. Now his weathered face showed only concern. "Boss, think about this. The doctors pronounced him dead 12 hours ago. 3 different doctors. This woman is clearly disturbed." "I said open the goddamn casket, Frank." The authority in his voice left no room for argument. 2 men carefully lowered the casket back onto its platform. Vincent's hands shook as he reached for the latches. Maria buried her face in her hands, unable to watch. The lid opened with a soft click. For a moment, nothing. Luca lay still, his small hands folded over his chest, a rosary woven between his fingers. He looked exactly as he had when they dressed him that morning, gone, at peace, beyond pain. Then his chest moved. It was barely visible, the slightest rise and fall, like a whisper of breath. But it was there. "Oh my God," someone breathed. Vincent's hand shot to Luca's neck, fingers pressing against the cold skin. There, faint, irregular, but unmistakable, a pulse. Weak as a butterfly's wing, but beating. "Call an ambulance." Vincent roared.
Now!
Chaos exploded through the chapel. People screamed, cried, pushed forward to see. Maria collapsed, then surged forward, her hands reaching for her son's face.
Luca!
Baby mama's here. Vincent scooped the boy into his arms, his voice cracking for the first time. Hold on, son. Please hold on. The homeless woman stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Relief and terror warred in her expression as Vincent's eyes found hers across the crowd. You, he said. What's your name? Clara. Clara Bennett. Come with us.
Now!
2 guards grabbed her arms, gently this time. As the ambulance sirens wailed closer, Vincent carried Luca toward the door. The boy's eyelids fluttered, and the faintest sound escaped his lips. Mama. Maria sobbed harder, running alongside them. The crowd parted like a wave. But as they rushed out into the rain, Clara caught something no one else noticed. Frank Russo stood near the altar, his face pale, his hand gripping his phone. For just a second, their eyes met. And Clara saw something that made her blood run cold. Not relief, not joy.
Fear.
The ambulance doors slammed shut, taking Luca, his parents, and Clara away from the estate. Behind them, the funeral guests stood in the rain, watching the emergency lights disappear down the long driveway. Frank Russo remained in the chapel doorway, his jaw tight. He pulled out his phone and typed a single message. We have a problem. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Luca lay in the bed, oxygen tubes running to his nose, machines beeping steadily. The doctors had stabilized him, but they had no answers. Medically induced coma, they said. Severe hypothermia. Drug toxicity levels inconsistent with any prescribed medication. None of it made sense. Vincent Romano stood by the window, watching his son's chest rise and fall. Maria sat beside the bed, clutching Luca's hand, refusing to let go. 3 guards stood outside the door. No one came in without Vincent's permission. Except Clara. She sat in the corner, still wearing her wet, ragged coat. The nurses had offered her dry clothes, but she'd refused, as if afraid that accepting anything might break whatever fragile protection she had. Her hands twisted in her lap. When the doctor finally left, Vincent turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. Everyone out, he said quietly. Maria looked up, alarmed. Vincent. Just for a few minutes, please. His wife hesitated, then kissed Luca's forehead and left, closing the door behind her. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Vincent pulled a chair across from Clara and sat down. He didn't speak immediately, just studied her, the way an apex predator studies prey before deciding whether to strike. How did you know? His voice was soft, dangerous. Clara's throat worked. I told you. I saw him breathing. Bullshit. Vincent leaned forward. The casket was closed when you came in. The viewing ended an hour before the service. You couldn't have seen anything from outside. So I'll ask again. How did you know my son was alive? Clara's hand stopped twisting. She looked up, meeting his eyes with surprising directness. Because I've seen it before. The symptoms. 15 years ago, at St. Catherine's Hospital in Manhattan. I was a trauma nurse there. Go on. There was a patient, a young man, mid-20s. Car accident. He came in unresponsive, barely any vital signs. Everyone called it. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. But something felt wrong to me. His color, the way his muscles responded. I insisted on running more tests. She paused, her voice dropping. They found a rare drug in his system. Something that mimicked death, slowed the heart, suppressed breathing, lowered body temperature. If we'd sent him to the morgue, he would have woken up in a drawer. Vincent's jaw tightened. What drug? Tetrodotoxin. From pufferfish. It's what voodoo priests in Haiti use to create zombies, puts people in a death-like state for hours, sometimes days. The words hung in the air like a blade. Who would do that to a child? Vincent's voice was barely a whisper. Clara shook her head. I don't know. But when I saw the funeral notice in yesterday's paper, saw your son's picture, the same age, the same sudden unexplained death, something told me to come. I've been homeless 3 years, Mr. Romano. I live in the park 6 blocks from your estate. I had nothing to lose. Why are you homeless? You said you were a nurse. Clara's face hardened. I was. Until I exposed the hospital administrator for selling organs on the black market. He had connections, lawyers, money. I had the truth. Guess which one won? She laughed bitterly. They destroyed my license, my reputation. Called me unstable, delusional. My husband left. My daughter won't speak to me. The hospital made sure I'd never work in medicine again. Vincent studied her for a long moment. Everything in his world operated on leverage, on angles, on what people wanted. But this woman wanted nothing from him. She'd risked her life, walking uninvited into a Mafia funeral for a child she'd never met. You could have stayed silent, he said. I couldn't, Clara whispered. Not again. Not another child. Before Vincent could respond, the door opened. The doctor stepped in, but it was Luca who changed everything. The boy's eyes had opened.
Luca.
Vincent was at the bedside in an instant, Maria rushing back in behind him. Son, can you hear me? Luca's eyes were glassy, unfocused. His lips moved soundlessly at first. Then, barely audible, scary. What's scary, baby? Maria smoothed his hair. You're safe now. You're safe. But Luca's head turned slowly, searching the room. His gaze passed over his parents, over the doctor, until it landed on Clara in the corner. His small hand lifted from the bed, reaching toward her. Lady. Clara stood frozen. Vincent and Maria exchanged glances. Luca, sweetheart, that's just, Maria began. Stay, Luca whispered, his eyes locked on Clara. Please stay. The doctor checked the monitors, frowning. His vitals are elevated. We should let him rest. No, Luca's voice grew stronger, panicked. She stays.
She
pulled me back. I was falling.
So dark.
But she pulled me back. Vincent's blood ran cold. His son had been unconscious when Clara stopped the funeral. Luca couldn't have known who she was, couldn't have seen her. Unless something else was happening here. Clara stays, Vincent said firmly. He turned to her, his voice carrying a weight of unspoken promise. You're under my protection now. Whatever you need, food, clothes, a place to stay. You saved my son's life. That means your family. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She nodded silently. But as relief flooded the room, neither of them noticed the surveillance camera in the corner, or the man watching the feed from another room. Frank Russo stood in the hospital administrator's office, his phone pressed to his ear. She knows about tetrodotoxin, he said quietly.
Yes.
I understand. It'll be handled. He ended the call and stared at the screen showing Clara and the Romano family. His hand moved to the gun beneath his jacket. Some problems, he knew, didn't go away on their own. The Romano estate felt different when they returned 3 days later. Luca was still weak, but the doctors cleared him to recover at home with round-the-clock nursing care. Vincent had converted the East Wing into a private medical suite, complete with monitoring equipment and 2 nurses who'd signed ironclad confidentiality agreements. And Clara, who refused to leave Luca's side. She'd been given a room next to his, new clothes, and a salary as his personal caretaker. But the look she received from Vincent's men told her exactly what they thought of the arrangement. On the 4th night, Vincent called a meeting in his study. 12 men sat around the mahogany table, his captains, his most trusted soldiers, the core of his organization. Frank Russo sat at his right hand, as always. Vincent poured himself a glass of whiskey, not offering any to the others. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your patience during this
difficult time.
My son is alive because of a miracle. But I didn't call you here to celebrate. He set the glass down hard enough to make several men flinch. I called you here because someone tried to murder my boy. The room erupted in angry denials, shocked exclamations. Vincent let them talk for exactly 10 seconds before slamming his fist on the table. Silence. The room fell quiet. The toxicology reports came back today. Tetrodotoxin, a paralytic poison that simulates death. It was in Luca's system for at least 6 hours before the funeral. The doctors say another hour in that casket, and his brain would have been permanently damaged. Vincent's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Someone in my house poisoned my 9-year-old son and hoped we'd bury him alive. Tony Marcello, one of the older captains, leaned forward. Boss, you think it was an inside job? Who else had access? Vincent's eyes scanned the room. Luca never leaves the estate without guards. His food is prepared by our kitchen staff. His medicine is handled by Frank, someone muttered. All eyes turned to the consigliera. Frank's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Frank personally oversees Luca's medication, Vincent said carefully. Has for years, since the boy's asthma started. Frank's been like an uncle to him. And Frank was awful quick to try and stop you from opening that casket, Tony added, his voice casual, but his eyes sharp. Frank's chair scraped back. You accusing me of something, Tony? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Enough? Vincent's voice cut through the tension. I'm not here to point fingers without proof. But someone in this organization wanted my son dead. Maybe to hurt me. Maybe to take over. Maybe for reasons I haven't figured out yet. He looked at each man in turn. I want names. Anyone who's been acting strange. Anyone who's had money problems. Anyone who's been in contact with our enemies. What about the homeless woman? Asked Jimmy the Knife Castellano, a young hothead from Brooklyn. She shows up out of nowhere, stops the funeral. Suddenly, she's living in your house? That doesn't strike anyone else as convenient. Several men nodded. Clara Bennett saved my son's life, Vincent said coldly. Or maybe she poisoned him first, Jimmy pressed. Think about it, boss. She knew exactly what drug it was. She knew when to show up. And now she's got access to everything. Your home, your family, your business. That's ridiculous, Frank said, but his voice lacked conviction. She's been homeless for years. Perfect cover, Jimmy continued. Who'd suspect her? She waltzes in, plays hero, gets into your inner circle. Now she's watching everything we do. Vincent's hand tightened on his glass. Are you suggesting the feds planted her? I'm suggesting we don't know anything about this woman except what she told us. And what she told us is that she's an expert on the exact poison used on your kid, Jimmy shrugged. I'm just saying, boss, it's worth checking out. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Vincent stood, and the murmurs died instantly. Here's what's going to happen. Marco, he pointed to his head of security. You dig into Clara's past. Everything. Confirm her story. Find out where she's been, who she's talked to, whether anyone's paid her recently. Yes, boss. Tony, Jimmy, you two investigate the kitchen staff, the guards, anyone who had access to Luca's food or medicine in the last month. I want backgrounds, phone records, bank accounts. What about me? Frank asked quietly. Vincent looked at his oldest friend, the man who'd stood beside him through 20 years of war and peace. You find out who our enemies are courting. The Calabrese family, the Russians, the Irish. Someone made a move. Someone thought killing my son would weaken me. I want to know who. Frank nodded slowly. Consider it done. As the meeting broke up, the men filed out in small groups, their voices low and suspicious. Jimmy lingered near the door, talking to two younger soldiers. Vincent caught fragments. Don't trust her. Too convenient. Probably working with someone inside. Frank remained seated until everyone else had left. You really think Clara's innocent? He asked. Vincent moved to the window, overlooking the garden. Below, he could see Clara walking with Luca, the boy's hand in hers, his laughter drifting up through the glass. It was the first time he'd heard his son laugh since before the death. I think, Vincent said slowly, that someone wanted my boy dead and Clara stopped it. Whether she knew about the plot beforehand or not. That's what I need to find out. And if she's guilty? Vincent's reflection in the glass showed no emotion. Then I'll kill her myself. After Frank left, Vincent pulled out his phone and dialed a private number. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Detective Morrison? It's Vincent Romano. I need a favor. Off the books. Down in the garden, Clara felt eyes watching her from every window. She pulled Luca closer, her instincts screaming danger. She'd saved the boy's life. But she was starting to wonder if, in doing so, she'd signed her own death warrant. Luca refused to eat. For 2 days, the boy pushed away trays of his favorite foods, spaghetti carbonara, chicken parmesan, chocolate gelato. The nurses tried coaxing him. Maria begged. Vincent's voice grew stern, then desperate. Nothing worked. Until Clara walked into the room. Hey, kiddo, she said softly, pulling a chair beside his bed. I heard you're on a hunger strike. Luca's dark eyes, so much like his father's, found hers. I'm not hungry. Liar, Clara smiled. Your stomach's been growling for the past 10 minutes. I could hear it from the hallway. A tiny smile tugged at Luca's lips. Maybe a little hungry. Just a little? Clara picked up the fork, twirled some pasta around it. This looks pretty good. Shame to waste it, she pretended to take a bite herself. That's mine, Luca protested. Oh, you want it now? Clara held the fork just out of reach. I thought you weren't hungry. Give it. Luca lunged forward, laughing, actually laughing, and Clara let him grab the fork. He ate 3 bites before realizing what she'd done. Maria stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She'd been trying to feed her son for hours. This homeless woman had done it in 30 seconds. Vincent watched from the hallway, his expression unreadable. The pattern continued. Luca would only take his medicine if Clara measured it. Would only sleep if she sat beside his bed. Would only go for walks if she held his hand. The boy who'd been distant and quiet before his death now clung to Clara like she was his lifeline. Why her? Maria asked Vincent one night, her voice breaking. I'm his mother. Why won't he let me help him? Vincent had no answer. He watched through the window as Clara read to Luca in the garden, the boy's head resting on her shoulder. Something in his chest, something he'd thought dead for decades, stirred uncomfortably. When was the last time he'd held his son like that? When was the last time Luca had looked at him without fear? Again, Luca demanded, bouncing on his bed despite the nurse's protests. Tell me the story again. Clara laughed, exhausted but unable to refuse. Luca, I've told you about the grumpy bear 3 times already. But I like how you do the voices, he grabbed her hand. Please, Clara. She couldn't say no to those eyes. As she launched into the tale again, making exaggerated bear growls that sent Luca into fits of giggles, she didn't notice Vincent standing in the doorway. He'd been there for 15 minutes just watching. His son, the quiet, anxious boy who flinched at loud noises and rarely smiled, was transformed around this woman. Luca glowed. He joked. He played. He was, for the first time Vincent could remember, just a normal 9-year-old kid. And it was tearing him apart inside. Vincent Romano had built an empire on fear and respect. He'd killed men who disrespected him. He'd crushed rivals without mercy. But watching a homeless woman give his son something he never could, simple, unconditional care, made him feel powerless in a way no enemy ever had. Boss. Vincent turned to find Tony standing behind him, a folder in his hands. Background check on Clara Bennett, Tony said quietly. It's all here. Vincent took the folder, but didn't open it. And she's clean. Everything she told you was true. Trauma nurse at St. Catherine's exposed the organ trafficking ring, lost everything because of it. No criminal record. No suspicious contacts. Her daughter Emily lives in Seattle, hasn't spoken to her in 3 years. Ex-husband remarried, Tony paused. Boss, she's exactly what she appears to be, someone who lost everything for doing the right thing. Vincent nodded slowly. He'd expected as much, but confirmation settled something in his chest. There's more, Tony continued, his voice dropping. I checked the kitchen staff, the guards, everyone who had access to Luca's medicine. Found something weird. What? 3 weeks before Luca got sick, someone ordered a specialty pharmaceutical shipment to the estate. Came through our offshore supplier, the one we use for untraceable medications. Vincent's jaw tightened. Who ordered it? That's the thing, boss. The order was placed using Frank's credentials. But when I asked Frank about it, he said he never placed any order. Said someone must have used his login. The implications hung heavy between them. Keep digging, Vincent said.
And Tony? Tell no one about this.
Especially not Frank. That night, Vincent found Clara sitting alone in the kitchen, long after everyone else had gone to bed. She was eating leftover pasta straight from the container, looking more exhausted than he'd ever seen her. He asleep? Vincent asked. Clara jumped, nearly dropping her fork. Mr. Romano. Yes, finally. Took 4 stories and a promise that I'd be here when he wakes up. Vincent poured himself a glass of water and sat across from her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Thank you, he said finally. Clara looked up, surprised. For what? For giving my son his childhood back. Even if it's just for a little while, Vincent's voice was rough. I built this life to give him everything. Safety, wealth, power. But I never gave him what you do, peace. He loves you, Clara said softly. He talks about you all the time. How strong you are. How everyone respects you. He wants to make you proud. He should want to be happy. Vincent's hands tightened around his glass. When you stopped that funeral, you didn't just save his life.
You saved.
Something I didn't know was still alive in this house. Clara reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture of comfort. Nothing more. But it was the first genuine human touch Vincent had felt in years. He's a good kid, Mr. Romano. Whatever happens, don't let this world take that from him. Vincent nodded, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Marco, his head of security. Found something.
Need to talk. Now.
It's about the medicine. Vincent stood abruptly. Get some rest, Clara.
Tomorrow might be
difficult. As he left, Clara felt the temperature in the room drop. She didn't know what message he'd received, but she knew one thing with certainty. The calm was over. The storm was about to break. Clara woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of Luca coughing. She'd been sleeping in the chair beside his bed, as she had every night since they'd returned from the hospital. The boy's coughs were wet, labored, different from his usual asthma flare-ups.
Luca?
She touched his forehead. Burning hot. Clara reached for the call button, but something made her pause. On the nightstand sat Luca's evening medications, the ones the nurse had brought at 10 p.m. The pills were still there, untouched in their small paper cup. But the liquid medicine, the one for his asthma, was half empty. Clara's blood ran cold. She'd watched Luca refuse all medication before bed, insisting he felt fine. He'd fallen asleep without taking anything. So who had given him the liquid medicine? She grabbed the bottle, held it up to the dim light. The consistency was wrong, thicker than it should be. And at the bottom, barely visible, was a fine sediment that hadn't been there before. Her nurse's training kicked in immediately. She checked Luca's pupils, dilated. His pulse, racing. His breathing, shallow and rapid. These weren't asthma symptoms. This was poisoning. Guards. Clara's voice cut through the night. I need help now. 2 men burst through the door, guns drawn. They found Clara holding Luca, the boy's lips turning blue. Call an ambulance, she ordered. And get Mr. Romano. Someone's poisoned him again. 30 minutes later, the estate was in chaos. EMTs worked on Luca in his room while Vincent stood over them, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Maria sobbed in the corner. And Clara stood by the window, clutching the medicine bottle like evidence. What happened? Vincent's voice was deadly quiet. Someone tampered with his asthma medication, Clara said. Look at the sediment. That's not supposed to be there. And the consistency is wrong. Someone added something. Frank Russo appeared in the doorway, his shirt half-buttoned as if he'd dressed in a hurry. What's going on? Someone tried to kill my son again, Vincent said. In my house. Under my protection. The EMTs loaded Luca onto a stretcher. He was breathing easier now. Clara had forced him to vomit immediately, purging most of whatever he'd ingested. But he needed hospitalization. As they wheeled him out, Vincent grabbed Clara's arm. You're coming with us. And you, he pointed at Frank, you find out who had access to that medicine. I want names in an hour. The hospital became a fortress. Vincent stationed guards at every entrance, every hallway, every window. No one came near Luca without being searched and verified. Clara sat beside the boy's bed, watching the monitors. The doctors said he'd be fine. She'd caught it early enough. But the fear in their eyes told her what they wouldn't say out loud. 2 attempts in 2 weeks meant someone was desperate. And desperate people made mistakes. She thought back to the medicine delivery. The night nurse, a woman named Patricia, had brought it on a tray at 10 p.m. Standard procedure. But Patricia had been hired just a week ago, right after Luca came home from the hospital.
Too convenient.
Clara's instincts screamed at her, the same instincts that had saved her patients dozens of times before. Something was wrong with the whole setup. The medicine had been tampered with after it left the pharmacy, but before it reached Luca's room. Which meant the threat was inside the house. She pulled out her phone. Vincent had given her one after she'd saved Luca and texted him. Need to talk.
About the medicine.
Privately. The response came seconds later. Stay with Luca. I'm handling it, but that wasn't good enough. Clara stood and walked to the hallway, where 2 guards stood watch. I need to make a phone call, she said. Private. The guards exchanged glances, but stepped back. Clara moved to the end of the corridor and dialed the hospital pharmacy. Hi, this is Clara Bennett calling about Luca Romano's prescription. I need to verify the dispensing records for his asthma medication from 3 days ago. The pharmacist, a kind older man named Ed, pulled up the records. Let's see. Albuterol solution, prescribed by Dr. Kendrick, filled on the 15th at 2 p.m. Picked up by Frank Russo at 2:30 p.m. Clara's heart stopped. Frank picked it up personally? Yes, ma'am. Signed for it and everything. Is there a problem?
No, Clara liegt.
Just double-checking. Thank you. She hung up, her hands shaking. Frank had personally picked up the medicine that poisoned Luca. Frank, who Vincent trusted completely. Frank, who had tried to stop the funeral. Frank, who always seemed to be in the right place at the wrong time. Clara's mind raced. If she told Vincent, would he believe her? Frank had been his right hand for 20 years. She was a homeless woman who'd been in their lives for less than 2 weeks. But if she stayed silent, and Luca died. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions, or you'll end up like the boy. You've been warned. Clara's blood turned to ice. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she was digging. She looked up and down the corridor. The guards stood at their posts. Nurses moved between rooms. Everything looked normal. But nothing was normal. She hurried back to Luca's room and locked the door behind her. The boy slept peacefully, unaware of the danger swirling around him. Clara sat in the chair, her body positioned between Luca and the door. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. The boss's men are meeting right now. They want you gone. They think you're the threat. Tick-tock, Clara. At the Romano estate, Vincent's remaining captains gathered in his study. Jimmy, the knife, spoke first, his voice sharp with frustration. Boss, with all respect, this woman is a problem. 2 poisonings since she showed up. She's the only new variable. She saved Luca both times, Vincent countered. Or she poisoned him and played hero to get close to you, Tony said carefully. Look, I know you're grateful. But think like a boss, not a father. She appears out of nowhere, knows about the poison, gets access to everything. Now Luca won't take medicine unless she gives it? That's control, Vincent. That's manipulation. Other men nodded in agreement. Get rid of her, Jimmy pressed. Before she gets your kid killed for real. Vincent's jaw tightened. Every instinct told him Clara was innocent. But his men he'd trusted for years, were unanimous. And in his world, unanimous voices usually meant something. "I'll handle it," Vincent said quietly. The men filed out, satisfied. But as the door closed, Vincent pulled out his phone and looked at Clara's text again. "Need to talk. About the medicine. Privately."
She'd found something. He was sure of it.
The question was, who would she accuse? And would Vincent believe her when she did? 3 days later, Luca was strong enough to come home. Vincent insisted on a family dinner to celebrate, something they hadn't done in months. The dining room table was set for 8. Vincent and Maria at the heads, Luca and Clara on one side, Frank and Tony on the other, with 2 empty chairs for guards who stood by the doors instead. Clara hadn't wanted to come. The threatening texts had continued, each one more specific. "You're dead. Leave before it's too late. No one will miss a homeless junkie." But Luca had begged her to attend, and she couldn't say no to those eyes. Now, sitting across from Frank Russo, she felt like a rabbit at a wolf convention. Frank smiled at her, warm, avuncular. "Clara, you look lovely. New dress." "Mrs. Romano gave it to me," Clara said quietly, her hand trembling as she reached for her water glass. "You've become quite important to this family," Frank continued, cutting his steak. "Luca here won't do anything without you." It's remarkable, really. There was something in his tone, not quite hostile but not friendly either. Like a snake deciding whether to strike. "She's my friend," Luca said firmly, reaching for Clara's hand under the table. "She's staying forever, right, Clara?" "We'll see, sweetheart," Clara murmured. Vincent watched the exchange, his dark eyes moving between Clara and Frank. He'd been quiet all evening, barely eating, just observing. Maria tried to keep conversation light. "Luca, tell everyone what you did in art therapy today." As Luca launched into an excited story about painting, Clara's mind raced. She had evidence now, not just suspicions. The pharmacy records, the text messages, the pattern of Frank's behavior. But accusing Vincent's oldest friend at a family dinner seemed insane. Yet waiting seemed more insane. How many more chances would Luca get? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another text. "Shut up and eat your dinner. Last warning." Clara looked up sharply. Everyone at the table had their phones visible except Frank, who sat face down beside his plate. Her heart hammered. It was now or never. "Mr. Romano," Clara said, her voice cutting through Luca's story. "I need to tell you something. About Luca's medicine." The table went silent. Vincent set down his fork. "What about it?" "I checked with the hospital pharmacy. The asthma medication that poisoned Luca, the one from 3 days ago, was personally picked up by Frank." Frank's smile didn't waver. "Of course I picked it up. I always handle Luca's prescriptions. You know that, Vincent." "But the medicine was tampered with," Clara pressed. "Between the pharmacy and Luca's room, someone added something to it. And you were the only one who had possession of that bottle." "That's a serious accusation," Frank said calmly, but his knuckles whitened around his knife. Tony leaned forward. "Clara, are you saying?" "I'm saying someone in this house tried to kill Luca twice. And every time, Frank was the one handling his medication." Clara pulled out her phone, her hands shaking. "I've also been receiving threatening texts. Telling me to stop asking questions. Telling me to leave or die." She slid the phone across the table to Vincent. He read the messages, his face darkening with each one. "Anyone could have sent those," Frank said. "This is ridiculous, Vincent. She's paranoid." "The last text came 5 minutes ago," Clara interrupted. "During dinner. Everyone's phones are visible on the table. Except yours, Frank. Yours is face down." Frank's smile finally cracked. "So what? I put my phone down during dinner. That's called manners." "Then you won't mind showing us your messages," Vincent said quietly. It wasn't a question. The room froze. Frank's jaw tightened. "Vincent, you can't seriously. Your phone."
"Now."
For a long moment, Frank didn't move. Then something shifted in his expression, the mask slipping, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. You want to know the truth? Frank stood slowly, his chair scraping back.
Fine.
Yes, I've been trying to protect you from this woman. She's playing you, Vincent. She poisoned your son, then played hero. Classic manipulation. That's a lie. Clara stood as well. You picked up the medicine. I picked up medicine that was already tampered with. Frank's voice rose. Someone got to it before me, and I've been trying to figure out who. But you, he pointed at Clara, you show up conveniently. You know exactly what poison was used. You insert yourself into this family. And suddenly Vincent's so grateful, he can't see what's right in front of him. Frank. Vincent's voice was ice. Sit down. No, Frank's hand moved toward his jacket. I've stood by you for 20 years.
Killed for you.
Bled for you. And you're going to believe some homeless junkie over me? Over everything we've built. Tony's hand went to his gun. The guards at the door moved forward. Don't, Frank warned, his hand inside his jacket now. Everyone just stay calm. Maria grabbed Luca, pulling him close. The boy's eyes were wide with terror. You tried to kill my son, Vincent said, standing slowly. Why? Frank laughed bitterly. Because he's weak. Because you're raising him to be soft. This family needs strength, Vincent. Not a 9-year-old who cries when he sees violence. He pulled out his gun but didn't point it at anyone yet. I was going to make it look natural. A tragedy. Then rebuild you into the leader you used to be. But he glared at Clara, she ruined everything. You're insane, Maria whispered. I'm practical. Frank's eyes were wild now. 20 years of resentment pouring out. The Calabrese family offered me a partnership. Your territory, split 50-50. All I had to do was weaken you, make you vulnerable. Kill the boy, destroy your will to fight. But you wouldn't even let me bury him properly. Vincent's face showed no emotion, but his hands trembled with barely contained rage. You were my brother. I was your servant, Frank spat. Always in your shadow. Always cleaning up your messes. Never getting the respect I deserved. He raised the gun, pointing it at Clara. And now this bitch has ruined years of planning. So here's what's going to happen. He never finished the sentence. Tony's bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Frank's gun went off, the shot wild, embedding in the ceiling. He stumbled backward, clutching his wound, disbelief on his face. You shot me. You pointed a gun at a woman in front of the boss, Tony said coldly. What did you expect? Vincent walked around the table slowly, each step deliberate. He took Frank's gun, emptied the bullets, and tossed it aside. Get him out of my sight, Vincent said quietly. The basement. I'll deal with him later. As guards dragged a screaming Frank away, Vincent turned to Clara. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but she stood her ground. You saved him again, Vincent said. Clara could only nod. Luca broke free from his mother and ran to Clara, wrapping his arms around her waist. You're not leaving, are you? You can't leave. Clara looked at Vincent over the boy's head. The Mafia boss's eyes held something she'd never seen before, genuine gratitude, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of respect. She's not going anywhere, Vincent said firmly. But as the guards secured the house and Maria took Luca upstairs, both Vincent and Clara knew the same truth. The war was just beginning. The attack came at midnight. Clara was reading to Luca when the first explosion shattered the east wing windows. The boy screamed. Clara threw herself over him as glass rained down, her body a shield between him and the chaos. Stay down, she yelled over the alarms blaring through the mansion. Gunfire erupted outside, automatic weapons, close and getting closer. Clara grabbed Luca and rolled off the bed, dragging him toward the bathroom. It was the only room without windows, the safest place she could think of. Clara, what's happening? Luca's voice was pure terror. Bad men are trying to hurt your daddy, Clara said, keeping her voice steady even as her heart hammered. But we're going to be okay. I promise. She locked the bathroom door and shoved Luca into the bathtub, pulling the shower curtain closed. Stay there. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Where are you going? I'm staying right here with you. Clara grabbed a towel bar, wrenching it free from the wall. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was something. More gunfire.
Closer now.
Voices shouting in Italian. Then English. Find the boy. The boss wants the boy. Clara's blood ran cold. This wasn't random violence. This was an execution squad, and Luca was the target. She positioned herself in front of the tub, the metal bar raised. Her nurse training hadn't prepared her for combat, but her years on the streets had taught her how to survive. You fought dirty.
You fought mean.
And you never, ever gave up. The bedroom door crashed open. 3 floors down, Vincent Romano was in his own war. Frank's confession had revealed the scope of the betrayal. 6 men in his organization were Calabrese plants, waiting for the signal to strike. That signal had come tonight, while Vincent was interrogating Frank in the basement. They'd blown the generator first, plunging the estate into darkness. Then came the assault teams, professionals with night vision and military-grade weapons. But Vincent Romano hadn't survived 30 years as a boss by being unprepared. Tony, take Marco and secure the west stairwell. Vincent barked, his own gun blazing as he dropped 2 attackers in the foyer. Jimmy, get to Luca's room.
Now.
Already going, boss. Jimmy sprinted toward the stairs, but a burst of gunfire cut him down. He collapsed, clutching his leg. Vincent's heart stopped. If Jimmy couldn't reach Luca, if those animals got to his son. He grabbed Tony by the collar. Get to my boy. Nothing else matters. You understand? Nothing. Tony nodded and disappeared up the darkened staircase. Vincent turned back to the attackers flooding through the broken front entrance. He recognized some of them. Frank's crew, men he'd trusted. Rage, cold and absolute, filled his chest. You want to die in my house? Vincent roared. Come on then. In the bathroom, Clara heard footsteps approaching. Heavy boots. Multiple men. In here, one said. Doors locked. Kick it in. Clara's grip tightened on the metal bar. Through the shower curtain, she could see Luca's small shadow. Perfectly still.
Good boy.
Smart boy. The door exploded inward. 2 men entered, guns raised. In the darkness, they couldn't see Clara pressed against the wall beside the door frame. Her nursing instructor's voice echoed in her head. The carotid artery carries blood to the brain. 7 pounds of pressure to the right spot will cause unconsciousness in seconds. Clara swung the bar with everything she had. The first man dropped like a stone, the bar connecting with his temple. The second man spun toward her, but Clara was already moving. She jabbed the bar into his throat, not enough to kill, but enough to send him choking to his knees. She grabbed his gun, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Clara? Luca's terrified voice came from the tub. Stay there. She aimed the gun at the doorway, her finger on the trigger. More footsteps. Running. Then Tony's voice. Clara, it's Tony. Don't shoot. How do I know it's really you? Clara called back. Because the boss will kill me if anything happens to you or the kid. And because I'm on your side. God damn it. Clara lowered the gun slightly as Tony appeared in the doorway, his weapon drawn. He saw the 2 men on the floor and whistled low. Remind me never to piss you off. Is it over? Not yet. Tony moved to the tub, checking on Luca. But the boss is handling it. Well, you'll see. Vincent stood in the ruined foyer surrounded by bodies. Some were his enemies. Some had been his men, traitors who'd chosen Frank and the Calabrese family over loyalty. The survivors knelt before him, hands zip-tied behind their backs. For men who'd bet on the wrong horse. Please, boss, one begged. Frank made us do it. He said you were getting weak. He said I was weak because I loved my son, Vincent finished quietly. Because I showed emotion. Because I wasn't willing to sacrifice my family for power. He walked along the line of kneeling men, his gun loose in his hand. You know what's funny? Frank was right about one thing. I did change when Luca was born. I did get soft. He stopped, looking at each man in turn. But tonight, you reminded me what I really am. What I've always been. He raised his gun. I'm the man who survives.
For shots.
For bodies hitting the floor. The remaining guards stood in shocked silence. Vincent had always delegated his violence before. Kept his hands clean. But tonight, he wanted everyone to see. He wanted the message clear. Anyone else want to question my strength? Vincent's voice echoed through the mansion. Anyone else think my son makes me weak? Silence. Good. Vincent holstered his weapon. Clean this up. I want every traitor identified by morning. And I want Frank Russo brought to my study. Alive. As his men scrambled to obey, Vincent climbed the stairs toward Luca's room. His suit was splattered with blood. None of it his. His hands were steady now, the trembling rage replaced by cold certainty. He found Tony, Clara, and Luca in the hallway. Clara still held the gun, her body positioned protectively in front of the boy. When she saw Vincent, she started to lower it, but he shook his head.
Keep it, he said.
You've earned the right to protect yourself. Then he knelt in front of his son. Luca's eyes were red from crying, but he was alive. Safe.
Papa, Luca whispered.
I was scared. I know, son. But Clara kept you safe. She's family now. Do you understand? Anyone who touches her, touches us. Vincent stood and looked at Clara. In her borrowed dress and bare feet, holding a gun with trembling hands, she looked nothing like the warriors he usually surrounded himself with. But she'd fought for his son. She'd risked her life without hesitation. You asked me once if I believed you were innocent, Vincent said quietly.
Ido.
And after tonight, everyone else will too. Behind them, the mansion burned in places, shattered in others. Outside, sirens wailed as corrupted police stayed away and ambulances came for the wounded. The Romano Empire had been attacked, had nearly fallen. But it had survived. And everyone would know. The Don's son was untouchable. And so was the woman who'd saved him. 3 weeks later, Vincent Romano called a meeting in the grand hall of his estate. Every captain, every soldier, every associate who worked under the Romano name gathered. The repairs from the attack were still ongoing. Scaffolding covered the east wing. New windows gleamed in the morning sun. But the family was whole again. Stronger than before. Clara stood at the back of the room, uncomfortable in the tailored suit Maria had insisted she wear. She didn't belong here, among these dangerous men with their expensive watches and calculating eyes. But Luca held her hand, refusing to let go, and that made all the difference. Vincent stood at the front, his presence commanding absolute silence. Beside him, on a chair everyone could see, sat Frank Russo, bound, beaten, but alive. Gentlemen, Vincent began, his voice carrying through the hall. We're here to settle accounts. 3 weeks ago, my consigliere, my brother in everything but blood, tried to murder my son. He conspired with the Calabrese family. He planted traitors in our organization. He nearly destroyed everything we built. Frank stared at the floor, his spirit broken. The Calabrese family thought killing my boy would weaken me. They thought grief would make me vulnerable. They were wrong. Vincent's eyes swept across his men. Grief didn't weaken me. It reminded me what I'm fighting for. Not territory. Not money. Family. He gestured to Tony. Bring them forward. The doors opened. 4 men were escorted in, Calabrese captains, captured during the attack. They looked terrified, as well they should be. These men paid for their betrayal with information, Vincent continued. Bank accounts, safe houses, drug routes, everything. The Calabrese family is finished in New York. Their territory is ours. Their men are scattered. And their boss, Vincent smiled coldly. Let's just say he won't be making any more deals. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Vincent turned to Frank. As for you, you wanted me weak? Destroyed? Instead, You made me remember who I am. You made me remember that mercy isn't weakness, it's a choice. And I choose not to give you any." He nodded. 2 guards dragged Frank to his feet and out of the hall. Everyone knew Frank wouldn't leave the estate alive. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. When the doors closed behind them, Vincent's expression softened slightly. He beckoned Clara forward. "Clara Bennett," he said. "Come here." Clara's legs felt like water. Lucas squeezed her hand encouragingly as she walked to the front of the hall, every eye on her. Vincent placed his hand on her shoulder. "This woman saved my son twice. Once at his funeral, when doctors and family had given up hope, and once during an attack, when trained killers came for him. She had no weapons, no training, no reason to risk her life.
But she did it anyway.
Because that's who she is." He turned to address the room. "Clara Bennett is under my protection now. She is family. Anyone who touches her, touches me. Anyone who threatens her, threatens my son. Spread the word. She walks in this city with the full weight of the Romano name behind her." The room erupted in applause. Not polite applause, but genuine respect. These men understood loyalty. They understood sacrifice. And Clara had proven herself in blood. Furthermore, Vincent continued, Clara will be Luca's guardian. She'll live here, on the estate, with full access and full authority over my son's care. What she says regarding Luca is law. Maria stepped forward, smiling through tears. "Welcome to the family, Clara."
Clara couldn't speak.
Tears streamed down her face as the reality hit her. 3 months ago, she'd been sleeping in Central Park, eating from trash cans, invisible to the world. Now she had a home, a purpose, a family. After the meeting ended, Vincent found Clara in Luca's room. The boy was showing her his comic book collection, chattering excitedly about superheroes and villains. "Can I talk to you?" Vincent asked. "Alone." Luca pouted but accepted Maria's suggestion of cookies in the kitchen. When they were alone, Vincent pulled out an envelope. "What's this?" Clara asked. "Your daughter's address in Seattle. And 2 plane tickets, one for you, one for her. If you want to rebuild that bridge." Clara's hands shook as she opened the envelope. "How did you? I can't give you back the years you lost. Can't erase what they did to you." Vincent's voice was gentle. "But I can give you a chance to start over. With resources. With protection. With proof that you were right all along." He handed her another folder. "Complete documentation of the organ trafficking ring you exposed. New evidence. Enough to reopen the case and clear your name." Clara looked up at him, stunned. "Why would you do this?" "Because you saved my son. Because you're a good person in a world that punishes good people." Vincent smiled, a real smile, rare and genuine. "And because Luca needs you. We all do." That evening, Clara sat in the garden with Luca, reading him another story. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the smell of Maria's cooking from the kitchen. Guards patrolled the walls, but for once, Clara felt safe. "Clara?" Luca looked up at her. "Are you happy here?" She thought about her old life, the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness. Then she thought about this strange new family that had adopted her. A mafia boss who trusted her with his only son. A boy who looked at her like she hung the moon. A second chance she'd never dared hope for. "Yes, sweetheart," Clara whispered, pulling him close. "I'm home." And for the first time in 3 years, she meant it.